Hello, my loves, and welcome back. As always, I'm so excited to have you here. And today we're going to be doing something really fun. I'm going to be doing a recap to share the key takeaways, insights, and aha moments from an event that I spent a really big chunk, almost my entire weekend at. And it was my first time going to this event. So I want to share this with you, just kind of give you some insights around this. I just mentioned it. It was my absolute first time, but I was invited by my mom. For those of you who don't know, my mom is my best friend in the whole wide world. And this is something I think she's actually been going to this event every single year for over a decade, minus a year or two because of COVID. But then she did like the virtual option of it. And she's invited me, and I think every single year. And it didn't feel like it was something I was interested in doing. I also have 3 little kids, so, like, giving up an entire weekend to go to something that didn't feel totally aligned, just, like, it didn't work out. But this was a year where she invited me, and I also had other opportunities come up this exact same weekend, like going to other events that were more in my industry. They were around entrepreneurship or they were around coaching, but there was something in me. Honestly, I think it just came from a desire of wanting to spend time with my mom. So I was like, yeah, let's go. We'll make it happen. And my husband was like, no problem. I'll hold down the fort with the kids. So the title of this event is the Religious Education Congress. And I want to share a little bit about this really quickly, just to give you some context. And we have a live studio audience today, and I was sharing with one of the women. I'll go ahead and out myself. I was a little nervous to even say what it was called. When I was talking about this event last week and the week before on my Instagram stories, I subbed out the word religious for spiritual. So I was saying that I was going to a spiritual education event, but I really want to call it what it is. And the reason why I avoided saying religious education is because I think the word religion can bring up a lot of different things for a lot of different people. And I want to go as far as saying it can be a little bit of a loaded word. It carries a ton of meaning. And I didn't want to say religion and have people perceive me a certain way or think of me a certain way, but this is actually not about me. This is about something bigger. And I want to share a little bit about what this is. The subtitle is Gather with a Global Community of Believers, Religious Educators, and Ministry Professionals. Renew your faith and your spirit. So there's something about that that just speaks so much to me. It says, whether you seek spiritual growth, professional development, or a deeper connection with your faith, this event offers something for everyone. This just got me all stirred up in the best possible ways. And what I mean by that is I'm somebody who's deeply curious. I also feel like I refer to myself as a believer, meaning I believe in a higher power. I happen to fall into a group where that higher power, for me, what feels most aligned is to call it God. And I also have a deep respect for people who believe in something higher and they call it universe, or they call it life force energy, or they call it goddess or Gaia. Or I have a lot of clients who absolutely believe in a higher power and they just don't know what they call it. They're not actually sure what name they want to give it. And so whenever I talk about spirituality, which if you are familiar with my spaces, it's a lot. It's actually part of almost every single conversation I find myself having personally and professionally, individually, and in group settings these days. I have zero expectation of what's right, what's wrong. I really don't think that anything is wrong in terms of beliefs. And I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. In fact, I love having conversations with people who have a completely different belief system than I do. Not because I want to have a debate or I want you to change your mind about anything. It's because I'm genuinely curious. I had shared earlier today, and I just Googled this to be sure. I Googled how many people are on the planet right now. There are over 8 billion 8 billion people, 8 billion souls on the planet. That means that there are over 8 billion different belief systems. And I don't know about you, but I get so excited about that because there's so many different learning opportunities. I wanted to give you a breakdown of this because I went into this event honestly having no idea what to expect. And I walked away with 22 pages of notes. And now we don't have the time or the space for me to share all of my notes with you, but I was sifting through them and pulling out really high level what my favorite teachings and aha moments and insights were. So I'm going to walk you through that. But one of the things that I also wanted to highlight and an aha moment about the overall experience for me was how I am somebody who loves going to any kind of live event. The way that I'm wired is I feel like I am more of an extrovert versus an introvert. Extrovert means that you are energized when you are with other people. Introvert means that you are most energized when you have time and space on your own. I think whether you're an introvert and extrovert, having alone time and having connection is really important, but it really comes down to what energizes you most. And I'm most energized when I'm with people. So I actually prioritize different kinds of events, and going to big scale experience, 1 day, 2 day, week-long events. This is something that I like to do multiple times a year, but I had never, ever experienced anything like this before. And it made me think about how over 10 years now of being an entrepreneur, I think I've gotten comfortable with certain types of groups and certain types of events. And I find myself being drawn to things that are related to business or entrepreneurship, or I go to things as a coach. I'm naturally introduced to and drawn to events where there's other people in my industry. And I love that. Don't get me wrong. I love my industry. Most of my best friends and clients are coaches. But I went to this event with probably 10,000 people, and the word coach and business and entrepreneurship, those words were not mentioned a single time. And it was so cool to put myself in a room that had a completely different focus than where I find myself the majority of the time. And so I kept thinking, I want to put myself in more rooms that feel really foreign, that feel completely different than what I'm used to. And so the first invitation is, I really just want you to take a minute to think about, when was the last time you put yourself in a room that not only put you outside of your own comfort zone, but was completely different than anything you've ever given yourself permission to do. Like just learning for the sake of learning, not necessarily for any purpose or for getting ahead. For me, it's always like, how can I take this thing I love and monetize it? And that can be helpful, but not always. At this event, I think, like I said, there were 10,000 people back in the day before COVID. The event drew in over 40,000 people from every country on the planet. There were probably about a dozen different languages spoken when we were together as a group for the opening ceremony and the closing ceremonies and the different services offered. There were typically 6 different translations, languages that I had never even heard of. And that just alone expanded my mind. Every culture and background you could think of, every age. I could not believe there were so many mothers who had literal newborn babies. I was not going to events like this when I had newborn babies. And there were people very easily in their 80s. I wouldn't be surprised if there were people in their 90s. It was so cool. And the other thing that had me most excited was this was an event all about faith, spirituality, and religion. Again, my all-time favorite things to talk about. But if I'm being completely honest, sometimes I have a hard time feeling really grounded and confident and convicted in talking about those things, because I talk about them from a felt sense. I talk about them from my own experience, which I know intellectually is enough, but these are concepts that are sometimes hard to prove. They're intangible. And I get nervous that I might not know enough or I might say the wrong thing. But the thing that had me so excited about this was throughout the weekend, there were over 140 different workshops. You couldn't go to that many. You had to choose. And my goodness, choosing was hard. But you guys, the people leading these workshops were scholars, doctors, scientists, psychologists. We had physicists. There were astronomers, astrologers, and everybody was there to talk about evidence of God, evidence of a higher power. And that boggled my mind in the best way. These adults who have literally dedicated their lives to what they do in fields that normally try to discredit a higher power, And they have found where all of this comes together. My body right now is buzzing because this is what I've always known, but actually learning from these individuals was incredible. And so I want to share some of these pieces with you. So 22 pages of notes is what we have, over 140 workshops you could choose from. And I want to share with you, out of 140, these were the hardest choices I've ever made. I had this program and I had a highlighter and I was going through and I was having to use all of my tools, my intuition, my muscle testing, all of the things that I teach my clients. I was standing up and I was asking my body these questions and seeing if I was going to sway forward for a yes or sway backwards for a no. So I want to share with you the workshops I ended up choosing. Workshop number 1, I chose Embracing the Divine Life, the Theological Virtues Unveiled. I feel silly admitting this, but the concept of virtues, like I've heard of values, but virtues is not a thing I'd thought about or even researched or known about very much until recently. I'm right now inside of a course for moms. It's a life coaching course for moms. It's been really fun. And this, in just the last couple of months, is the first time I'm learning about virtues, and it's mind blowing. So I was so excited when I saw this class, I chose it. The other one was Imperfect Parenting, the only kind of parenting there is. The Us God Loves, Self-Compassion in a Broken World. A Call to Compassion was the title of the event. And so a lot of the workshops were around compassion. This Little Light of Mine, Making a Difference in Our World. I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I probably could have taught this one. I didn't take too many notes. And I was like, yeah, it just felt like reminders. It felt like a lot of the incredible work that I do and the entrepreneurs that I serve and what it feels like to be led by something bigger. Every single person in my world, the number one thing that they're dedicated to is making a difference in the world using the gifts they've been given. So it was fun. It was more of like a light reminder. And then the last one, which admittedly was my all-time favorite, was called Finding Our Way in Hope and Compassion, Understanding the Human Condition. The human condition is literally at the heart of everything I do. Understanding the mind and body connection, why people do things. We were talking about nervous system regulation. We were talking about trauma, all through the lens of spirituality and faith. It literally could not be any better. So just kind of giving you an overall view as I bring you into this. And then again, I was flipping through my notes. And so this is going to be a good time. If you don't already have a pen and paper handy, something to write with, you may want to grab that right now because I'm literally going to give you some of my biggest aha moments from a few of these workshops. So one of the very first things I had written down from workshop number 1, Living or Embracing a Divine Life, was about the concept of freedom. Now, I don't know about you, but when it comes to values and things I value most, like if somebody were to ask me, and I feel like I have been asked this more recently inside of my personal and my professional life than any other time, but I've had people say, like, what are your top values? Freedom falls in the top 3 for me. I'm curious, those of you listening, how many of you would agree that the value of freedom lands really high on your list? And so again, these things are blowing my mind because I've never learned this totally like outside of anything that I've ever been taught. There were words I had never heard, like dozens of words that I had never heard before that I had to write them down. And I'm like, I need to go Google that. This is insane. This is amazing. So number 1, the freedom of indifference versus the freedom for excellence. So 2 different types of freedom that lead to 2 totally different paths. So I want to break this down really quickly because again, so many things blew my mind wide open and this was one of them. So freedom of indifference is I can do whatever I want. And a lot of us believe that freedom is choice. Like I can choose whatever I want. I can go wherever I want. I can do whatever I want. And I know that there's something, I don't know, that feels really freeing and expansive about that. However, that doesn't necessarily lead us to where we want to go. There's something a little bit, I want to say like careless that can come up with that kind of freedom. It's the freedom to choose anything but you're not actually choosing it in a meaningful way. You're not actually considering if it's good for you or good for the others. It's almost like immediate gratification. Like, what do I want right now in this moment? Right? It's like, okay, I open my fridge and my fridge is full of all these wonderful things, so I can eat junk food all day long. Sure, you have the freedom to do that, but is that actually going to lead you to where you want to go? Right? So that's freedom of indifference, but freedom for excellence often includes, I don't love this. There's another podcast episode that many of you loved, all about consistency, discipline, and devotion. And even recording that, I could feel my body contracting because there's something about those words and those terms that feel like there's almost like shackles on my wrist. Like, don't tell me what to do. You tell me what to do, and I'm literally going to want to tear out of the invisible cage that you've put me in, and I'm going to want to rebel. But freedom for excellence has to do with the quote here. If freedom of indifference was, I can do whatever I want, freedom for excellence is, I have the power to become who I'm meant to be. And it's the freedom to make choices that actually ultimately lead you to where you want to go. And sometimes that doesn't actually feel as freeing in the moment. The example that the speaker, his name's Matthew Ramage, gave was sports, like a basketball player having to throw like 500 free throw shots, and how annoying that is, and doing drills and doing trainings, and how that can feel really confining. But then once you do that and you've practiced and you're at the game, these things happen naturally, and you get to experience the joy and the happiness and the success that came with choosing to do the hard thing. You have the freedom to choose, and sometimes choosing the hard thing, not always, but sometimes that leads to excellence. So the example here is, a musician isn't truly free to create beautiful music until they've put in the practice. The same goes for us creating the lives, the businesses, and the impact we desire. So as I'm saying this, you might be hearing it and it's like, well, yeah, that sounds like common sense. But these two distinctions were so incredibly helpful and eye-opening. The next one, this is the last one about the virtues. There's all different kinds of virtues. I did not know that there are specifically 3 theological virtues. If you know what those are, I'm going to be really impressed, because I wouldn't have guessed any of these. And also, fun fact, I just love the work that I do and how this gets to be a really big part of it, because if I would have majored in anything other than business administration in college, it probably would have been theology. Because of the school that I went to in high school, theology was my favorite subject. And then in college, I didn't have to take theology, but you had to take a certain amount of like extra classes to get extra units. And anytime I could, I would take theology, because it's just so fascinating to me to learn about these belief systems and the history of all of this. So coming back to that, when I see the word theology, I feel so nerdy, but my heart skips a beat with excitement. I'm like, I'm going to be so happy with whatever we're about to learn here. So the 3 theological virtues are faith, hope, and love. And I love these definitions. I want to share them really quickly because I use the word faith a lot. I feel like a big part of the work that I do is the intersection of faith and intuition. There's something really powerful there. And so I've had people ask me, like, how do you have such a strong faith? Or people who come to me and they're going through something and they're sort of wrestling with what faith means to them. I love this definition. Faith is trusting in a bigger plan. I would say in God's plan, even when you can't see the full picture. It's believing in what's possible beyond what's visible. That is why faith is really hard, because so many times we feel like we want to see it before we can believe it. And faith is the opposite. You have to believe it if you want to see it. So there's that. Hope, I love this. Hope is the unshakable confidence that good things are coming. It's the deep knowing that there are divine promises for your life. They are real even if they're not here yet, even if you're in the waiting. And this reminds me of things that I teach inside of Energy Expansion Academy. We have mantras like, yes, please, more, please. How does it get even better than this? A client of mine reached out to me this morning and said, Dani, there's this thing that happens where someone will send me a message and my inbox will light up. And there's a moment of pause. I'm scared to open the message because I'm worried it's going to be bad. Can you relate to that? When 99.9% of the time, there's a really good chance you're going to open up that message and it's going to be amazing news. It's going to be an opportunity. Someone's going to want you to speak on their podcast. Someone's going to want to say, hey, I want to hire you as my coach or my healer or whatever it is. But there's that moment of like, ooh, this could be bad. And my response to her was, I want you to have an expectant heart. That doesn't mean, and we have to be careful with that, because expectations can actually lead to a sticky scenario, right? I once heard that expectations are the root of all suffering, meaning 99% of the time when we're unhappy, it's just because there was a spoken or unspoken, conscious or even unconscious expectation that wasn't met. But if we can move through the world with an expectant heart, which means, of course, things are going to go my way. Of course, this is going to be amazing. Of course, there's amazing opportunities. Of course, I'm going to open up that message and it's going to be something even bigger and better than anything I could have imagined. Of course, blessings and miracles are on my way, are on their way to me, right? I'm on my way to them. That's what I mean by an expectant heart. That would be my definition of hope, the unshakable faith that something good is coming. So good. From a different conversation, someone else said that people who have hope live differently. And that landed. Someone who has hope, who's operating from the energy of hope, is going to live very differently than someone who's rooted in hopelessness. And I'm not saying hopelessness is bad, but the energy, the frequency of that is going to create a completely different quality of life. And I truly believe that we have a say in the matter. It might be hard to pull ourselves out of the hole of hopelessness or despair or wherever you are, but you do have an invitation. You have the freedom to choose. And the last one, love, or really what it is, it's faith, hope, and charity. But charity is really all about love, choosing to lead with love in all things. So those are the theological virtues. I loved those. Moving on, we're going to go really quick. Otherwise, this episode's going to be way longer than any of the other ones. And I want this to be bite-sized, something you can take and carry with you for the rest of your day to make a big difference. So someone had asked a question, how does God show himself to us? I'm using himself because that's what lands with me. You can say himself, herself, itself, whatever term. I know that I sometimes talk about going like off the rails here for a second. There's somebody known as Abraham Hicks. If you know, you know. If you don't, go Google it. And there's this woman, Esther Hicks, who channels Abraham, and Abraham is the consciousness of all souls. And so Abraham refers to itself as they. So whatever you want to say, but I'm going to say him. How does God reveal himself to us? And the response was, God comes disguised as our lives. God is hidden in ordinary moments. And I really love that, because I think that there are moments when there's the little bit of the victim, when we're really in it. You guys, trying to potty train my son for the second time. I'm in it, right? That might seem seemingly small to others, but if you know anything about this, it is so frustrating. And it's like, this is terrible. I hate this. When is this going to end? So it could be something really small, like potty training your kid. It could also be something really tragic or heartbreaking. And it's like, okay, God, universe, spirit, where the heck are you? And I think that one of our greatest superpowers is being able to see this can be really hard sometimes. I hope this doesn't feel like an insensitive slap in the face to anybody, because that's the furthest from my intention. But there is a spiritual superpower in being able to see the perfection and what I want to say, the divinity, like the bigger plan in every single situation, and to trust that it's being used for good. Something that I heard someone say recently, and I've adopted it, is the hand of the Holy Spirit is on that. Like, I don't know what, I don't know why, but it's going to be used for something good. I think it's a different way of saying, I don't even want to relate it to that. Like everything happens for a reason. We got to be really careful with that, but trusting that everything is being used for a bigger purpose and that it's going to be used for good and everything's going to unfold exactly as it's meant to. I think that has a more gentle landing than like everything happens for a reason. But I do feel like if you know anything about my story, it has not been rainbows and butterflies. And I think deep down, even when I was a little girl, I didn't have that language necessarily, but the frequency of that language lived within me. And that's what allowed me to persevere and to keep showing up, even when I had no proof that it was going to work out and this relates to personal and professional life. So God comes disguised as our lives in every single moment. And this is a spiritual superpower that we can all really lean into. One other thing, we're getting like really biblical here. We're going way off the spiritual deep end, but there was a story that one of the speakers were telling about, I have to tell you, I've never read the Bible front to back. I don't know that I will ever read the Bible front to back. I know some Bible stories, so I did not actually know this. And I don't know if this is completely accurate, but this is what the speaker said. And I almost wanted to cry when I heard this, that in the Bible, Jesus heals a lot of people. Jesus was the first mystic. Jesus was the first like real healer that we can ever link back to. Jesus never said, my gosh, this makes me emotional. He never healed someone and said, look, I healed you. He never healed anybody and said, look, God healed you. Do you know what he said? All he ever said was, your faith has healed you. Your faith is what has healed you. Going back to those 3 theological virtues, faith, hope, and charity. Charity is another way of saying love. If we want to experience the deepest level of healing, our only job is to hold those, is to come back to those, is to be anchored in those. We are our own greatest healers. The greatest healer on the planet, known to man, never took credit. He pointed at you and said, you are the reason why this healing took place. It was your faith that healed you. I'm just going to leave it at that and move on to the next one. But I loved that one. There was a lot of talk about seeing yourself and others through the eyes of God, through the eyes of love, through the eyes of the divine. And this spoke so deeply to me because there was a very big portion of my life where people would reflect back to me who they saw me to be, really lovely things, really nice things. People would tell me how I was changing their lives. And it literally would bring me to tears because I couldn't see what they saw. And it was really actually painful and frustrating for me because I wanted to see it and I wanted to believe it. And it was like they were, you guys are going to be listening to this on the audio and I'm using my hands right now, so we'll have to get this one on YouTube. It was like they were energetically a few feet in front of me. And then there was almost this energetic wall in front of my heart. And their words would like hit this wall and bounce right off, but like never actually make it to me. And so really early on in my business, when I realized this was happening, my prayer was, God, let me see myself the way that you see me. And that was one of the most powerful prayers. And I have to come back to that again to this day. Let me see myself the way that you see me. I want to see myself, and not only myself, but I want to see others through your eyes. Imagine somebody who you find deeply frustrating and annoying, or someone who has created any amount of pain in your life. Imagine if there were a pair of God glasses that we could put on, and those lens in those glasses would allow us to see that perspective, see that person from the perspective of the divine. It would instantly change inside of our body how we feel about that person, how we engage with that person, how we speak to or with that person. And so I had just written that down. I don't remember specifically what talk that came from, but seeing myself and others through the eyes of God came up there. And I just remember that prayer that I prayed all of those years ago. So that's what's on my notes. I want to go through, there was one last talk that I took the most notes from this. One thing that I really wanted to prioritize was I want to say that only 10 to 15% of the 100 and however many workshops there were led by women, which made me kind of sad. So I really wanted to prioritize learning from women as long as the topics really got me excited. And so the very last one, this was the one all about hope and compassion and the human condition. It was Dr. Josephine Lombardi. I did this thing where if you guys go anywhere with me, you actually might not want to go anywhere with me after I tell you this. We're going to sit in the front row. Even if there's like 200 rows, we are going to march up to the front with our workbooks. Even if nobody else has workbooks or journals, you're going to bring one and I'm going to bring one and we're going to sit in the front and we're going to take the notes. So I'm like front and center. She is the most beautiful, like radiant human being. So well spoken, so smart, so funny. Also happens to be a mom of 4 adult children. She does not look like she could be a mom of 4 adults. So I'm literally just like Google-eyed, like she's my goals. I want to be her when I grow up. But her talk was so amazing. I want to see if she talked about the 3 virtues as well. She's the one who said that one who hopes lives differently. I'd already said that earlier. What else? I took 7 pages of notes with her alone. I touched on a lot of these pieces. Oh, she talked about something that we dive into a lot when I'm working with my clients and when I am supporting people one-on-one. We'll probably wrap up right here. I'm curious if you've ever heard the term a charism. Have any of you ever heard of a charism? I had never heard this. We've talked about this before. So a charism is a spiritual gift that you are divinely given to help you fulfill your purpose and serve others in a way that expands the collective consciousness. These are not necessarily natural talents. These are like supernatural gifts. They're working through you, but they're actually meant for you to give others. Charisms are the reason why you're on the planet. We've talked about this in a roundabout way, but there's actually a word for these things. So 3 ways that charisms work. They are divinely powered. These are not things that you just do. You are a vessel for these things. These gifts work through you. When you use them, it feels like life happens effortlessly. And as a result, the lives that you touch are transformed. Number 2, they bring joy and expansion. Your charisms are what make you feel alive, energized, and deeply fulfilled. Number 3, they create impact. They are always meant to serve, uplift, and bring people closer to God, closer to themselves, closer to their purpose, more tapped into their intuition. So some examples of this would be teaching. When you explain something and people have an aha moment or they feel spiritually expanded. One of my favorite compliments, I actually used to get self-conscious about this, but people would come up to me after workshops and they were like, the things that you said, none of it was new. I've heard it all before. But there's a way that you said it and I got it. I've heard it 10 times before and I didn't actually understand it. It didn't land for me until you said it. There's a way that you said it. I'm like, oh, okay, great. Encouragement. People who are naturally good at uplifting and igniting a spark in others. Healing is a charism. Leadership is a charism. Wisdom and discernment is a charism. Your charisms are your clues to your calling. When you tap into them, you operate from an unmatched level of alignment. And this includes personally, professionally, every area of life, business, and your impact. That was one of the big things with Josephine. Oh, she also Oh, she was talking about the power of prayer. And I believe in the power of prayer, but she really had it land for me around the energetics and frequency. She didn't use those words, but she said something. Listen to this. She said, the greater the intent of our prayers, the greater the sincerity of our prayers, the greater the outcome of our prayers. High energy and frequency. It is real, is what I heard her say. If you just sit down and you get on your knees and you pray and you're just going through the motions, it's not going to work that well. But if you really get clear on and you really feel what you're praying for and you put all of your intention, all of your energy, all of your sincerity behind that, the prayer quite literally takes on a life of its own. I loved hearing that. The last thing I put here, she said so many things. Nothing can stop God's plan for your life. Nothing can stop God's plan for your life. Nothing can stop God's plan for your life. So I want to end with a story that had me feeling so lucky, like the luckiest girl in the thousands of people there. So I was fangirling so hard over this Josephine Lombardi. I was like, I want to look like her. I want my 4 kids. I mean, well, 3 kids. I'm not having 4 kids. I have 3 kids. She has 4 kids. My bad. Freudian slip there. But like, my kids are going to grow up and they're going to be amazing and they're going to be so rooted in their faith and da 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 da. And she was doing a book signing. So I was like, I'm going to go get her book. And she kept like holding up this book and she was referencing, it's called On Earth as in Heaven. So I go down to the book signing and I realize, oh, she doesn't have the books with her. So I said, I want you to sign my book, but I need to go buy your book. Where's your book? And she goes, okay, go down there. It's this huge exhibit hall. So I marched down there. I don't know how this guy knew. He looks at me kind of with an attitude, not my attitude. He had the attitude, not me. Because I was very, very happy to get this book signed. And he goes, oh, if you're looking for On Earth as in Heaven, we just sold the last one. And I was like, you did? Well, I want to get a book signed. He was like, well, we don't have any more. So I said, well, do you help me out, man? Do you have any other books? Is there anything else you can sign? So he goes, yeah. So I'm like, okay, I'll buy one of those. And I just want her to sign that book. So I buy the book that was different than the talk, but I just wanted her signature. I just wanted to hang out with her for a minute. So I walk back up to her and I make this little like sad pouty face. And I'm like, Josephine, I have good news for you and sad news for me. Your book sold out. Congratulations. And she's looking around. There's nobody around. And she picks up her backpack. She unzips it. And she pulled out her personal copy of On Earth as in Heaven. And she goes, I have one copy. And I think it's for you. I think you're right. So I got a twofer. I even offered, like, people writing books is a labor of love. I said, can I Venmo you? Like, do you want me to go on Amazon and buy another one and gift it? And she's, no. This is my gift to you. So I got a twofer. I love a twofer. I got both of her books. She signed both of her books. I'm going to send her this podcast episode to tell her how much I love her. Hi, Josephine. Thank you for everything. But I think that this is a really good place. I wanted to end with that fun story. I told my husband, I was like literally jumping up and down like a child. He was like, cool story, bro. And I'm like, but you don't understand. It was the best thing ever. So that was my kind of long. This is probably one of our longer podcast episodes. My recap of the Religious Education Congress. And it was so amazing. It was so life-giving. It was so wildly expansive. I felt like teeny tiny in the best possible way. Does that make sense? Like a drop in the ocean, kind of a teeny tiny, or that not like small, like I'm not enough, but that reminder of, hi, you are a microscopic dot on a rock that's moving through life at 1,000,000,000,000,000 miles an hour. Like, what are you doing? Go do the things. Kind of small. That's how I felt. And I'm so grateful for that. And I'm just going to claim more experiences like that for me and for you this year and beyond. So thank you. If you're still here, you are the real MVP. I love you so much, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.